Andrei Chikatilo, known as the Rostov Ripper, was one of the most infamous serial killers in history, terrorizing the Soviet Union from 1978 to 1990. He preyed on children and vulnerable individuals, luring them into secluded areas before brutally murdering them. His crimes involved sadistic torture, including stabbing, mutilation, and even cannibalistic tendencies. Despite early suspicions, he managed to evade law enforcement for years due to forensic misunderstandings and police inefficiencies. His ability to blend into society as a husband, father, and former teacher added to the horror of his double life. The investigation into his crimes was marred by wrongful convictions and executions of innocent suspects. Ultimately, it was a combination of surveillance, forensic advancements, and psychological profiling that led to his arrest. His trial, one of the most publicized in Russian history, revealed the full extent of his depravity. He was convicted of 52 murders and executed in 1994. The case serves as a chilling reminder of human depravity and the importance of justice, while also raising moral questions about how societies handle such evil. Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo was born on October 16, 1936, in Yabloknoy, Ukraine, amidst the hardships of Stalin's forced collectivization. His early life was marked by extreme poverty, famine, and war. His mother, Anna, often recounted how his older brother had been kidnapped and cannibalized by starving neighbors, though no evidence confirms this story. His father, Roman, was drafted into World War II, captured, and later branded a traitor upon his return, further stigmatizing the family. The harsh realities of war and deprivation shaped Andrei's childhood. Food was scarce, and he suffered from malnutrition, often fainting from hunger. He shared a single bed with his mother and wet the bed frequently, which led to severe beatings and humiliation. These early experiences contributed to his growing sense of inadequacy and isolation. When German forces occupied Ukraine, Andrei witnessed bombings, executions, and atrocities that left a deep psychological impact on him. His mother's rumored rape by a Nazi soldier, resulting in the birth of his sister Tatiana, further fueled his resentment and emotional turmoil. At school, Chikatilo was a weak, shy, and bookish child, often bullied for his timid nature and poor eyesight. Despite excelling academically, he struggled socially. He developed a deep sense of inferiority, especially when he discovered his impotence during adolescence. His first known sexual experience involved attacking a young girl, an incident that solidified his association between violence and sexual arousal. This dysfunction persisted throughout his life, influencing his later crimes. After failing to get into Moscow State University, he joined the military, where he gained discipline but remained socially awkward. Upon returning home, his sister arranged his marriage to a woman named Faina, with whom he had 2 children. Despite appearing as a family man, his dark urges remained unchecked, leading him to a teaching career where he began molesting students, foreshadowing the violent predator he would become. Chikatilo committed his first documented murder on December 22, 1978, luring 9-year-old Lena Zakitnova into an abandoned shed. He attempted to rape her, but unable to perform sexually, stabbed her repeatedly, achieving orgasm in the process. Despite an eyewitness seeing him with the girl, another man, Alexander Kravchenko, was arrested, convicted, and later executed for the crime. This wrongful conviction allowed Chikatilo to continue killing unchecked. In 1971, Chikatilo began working as a teacher of Russian language and literature at vocational school number 32 in Novoshakhtinsk. While he was knowledgeable about his subjects, he struggled to maintain classroom discipline. His timid nature and inability to command authority led to frequent ridicule from students. However, his most concerning behavior was his inappropriate interactions with young students. He was known to enter girls' dormitories under false pretenses, watch students inappropriately, and engage in lewd acts while in their presence. Chikatilo's predatory behavior escalated to physical assaults. In one incident, he groped a 15-year-old girl in a swimming pool, ejaculating as she struggled to free herself. On another occasion, he locked a young female student in a classroom and forcibly molested her. Despite complaints from both students and teachers, the Soviet authorities often dismissed allegations of sexual abuse or sought to cover up misconduct to maintain institutional reputation. The complaints against him were initially ignored or dismissed as minor infractions. However, as the number of complaints grew, Chikatilo's actions could no longer be overlooked. Parents began protesting against his continued employment, demanding action be taken. The school administration, rather than reporting him to law enforcement, decided to quietly remove him from his position to avoid scandal. He was forced to resign in March 1981 and was subsequently blacklisted from working as a teacher. Despite his dismissal, no criminal charges were filed, allowing him to seek other employment without his past behavior being scrutinized. In 1981, after losing his teaching job due to sexual misconduct allegations, he found employment as a traveling supply clerk, giving him access to victims across multiple regions. This new job required him to travel extensively across the Soviet Union, providing him with access to numerous potential victims. With his sexual urges unchecked and without the constraints of a school environment, he soon began to escalate his crimes from molestation to murder. His preferred hunting grounds were train stations and bus stops, where he targeted runaways and vulnerable individuals. His method involved befriending victims before leading them to isolated forested areas, where he would tie them up, mutilate them, and stab them repeatedly while achieving sexual gratification. His victims ranged from young children to teenagers and young women, often prostitutes or vagrants. He frequently gouged out their eyes, fearing they retained an imprint of his image. Some victims had their genitals removed, and in some instances, he was known to have eaten body parts. His frenzied killing continued for over a decade, claiming at least 52 confirmed victims. His second victim was 17-year-old Larissa Tkachenko, whom he encountered on September 3, 1981. He lured her to a secluded area near the Don River under the guise of drinking vodka together. When she resisted his advances, he became violent, beating and strangling her before mutilating her body with a stick and his teeth. He removed one of her nipples by biting it off and covered her body with leaves before fleeing the scene. 3 months later, on June 12, 1982, he murdered his third victim, 13-year-old Lyubov Buryak. He spotted her walking home from a shopping trip and convinced her to follow him. Once in an isolated area, he attacked her, slashing her body 22 times and gouging her eyes out. The brutality escalated as he experimented with inflicting greater pain and suffering upon his victims. His fourth murder occurred on July 25, 1982, when he targeted 14-year-old Lyubov Volobyeva at a train station. Luring her to a secluded forest, he overpowered her, stabbing her multiple times and removing internal organs. The attack mirrored his previous killings, demonstrating a growing confidence in his ability to evade capture. Her body was found 2 weeks later. With each murder, Chikatilo refined his techniques, reveling in the suffering of his victims. These early killings marked the beginning of a decade-long killing spree that would claim the lives of at least 52 confirmed victims, making him one of history's most sadistic serial killers. His final 4 murders occurred in 1990 as his killing spree reached its peak. On August 14th, he targeted 11-year-old Ivan Fomin near Novocherkassk Beach, luring the boy under the pretense of showing him a shortcut. Chikatilo led him into a secluded area where he violently stabbed and mutilated him. His body was later found bearing over 40 knife wounds, including the signature castration and eye mutilation that had become his gruesome hallmark. On October 17, 1990, he murdered 16-year-old Vadim Gromov. The boy was last seen near Donlaska Station, where he had been approached by Chikatilo. His body was discovered days later in a forest, stabbed repeatedly and sexually mutilated. Investigators noted that Chikatilo had become increasingly brazen, leaving behind more forensic evidence and taking greater risks with each crime. 2 weeks later, on October 30th, Chikatilo lured another teenage boy, 16-year-old Viktor Tishchenko, from Kirpiknaya Station into a nearby wooded area. The struggle was intense, as Tishchenko fought back furiously, inflicting a deep bite wound on Chikatilo's finger. The crime scene revealed a ferocious struggle, with numerous stab wounds inflicted on the victim. The brutal murder showed signs that Chikatilo was losing control over his methodical approach to killing. His final victim, 22-year-old Svetlana Korostik, was murdered on November 6, 1990. He encountered her at Donless gas station and convinced her to follow him into the woods. There, he stabbed her multiple times and mutilated her body, removing parts and consuming portions of her flesh. As he left the scene, he was spotted by an undercover officer, his erratic behavior drawing suspicion. This crucial sighting led to his arrest just 2 weeks later, finally bringing an end to his reign of terror. Serial killers were virtually unheard of in the Soviet Union, and initially, police failed to connect the murders. By 1983, Moscow Detective Major Mikhail Fedosov and forensic analyst Viktor Bureaucratic took over the case, recognizing a pattern. Investigators erroneously believed the killer's blood type was AB based on semen samples, leading them to dismiss Chikatilo as a suspect in 1984 after a blood test showed his type as A. Meanwhile, innocent men were wrongfully arrested and some even executed. By 1990, due to increased public pressure, authorities deployed undercover officers at train stations, watching for suspicious individuals. On November 6, 1990, a police officer noticed Chikatilo leaving a crime scene with blood on his face. He was briefly detained but released. However, investigators reviewed past suspects and realized his name had appeared multiple times. Surveillance was initiated, and on November 20th, 1990, he was arrested. This time, forensic testing revealed that his semen type did not match his blood type due to a rare genetic anomaly, confirming him as the killer. He was interrogated for days, but refused to confess until psychiatrist Dr. Alexander Buchanovsky used psychological profiling to gain his trust. On November 30th, Chikatilo confessed to 56 murders in gruesome detail, even leading police to undiscovered bodies. Chikatilo's trial began on April 14, 1992, in Rostov. Due to public outrage, he was placed inside a metal cage for protection. His behavior ranged from erratic to seemingly indifferent. At times, he sang, muttered gibberish, and even exposed himself in court. He was charged with 53 counts of murder and 5 cases of sexual assault. The trial lasted until August, and despite his defense arguing he was insane, psychiatric evaluations determined he was fit to stand trial. The jury deliberated until October 15, 1992, when he was found guilty of 52 of the 53 murders. Judge Leonid Akubzanov sentenced him to death, stating, "This court has no alternative but to impose the only sentence that he deserves." Chikatilo appealed, claiming his psychiatric evaluation was biased, but the Russian Supreme Court upheld the verdict. On February 14, 1994, he was executed by a gunshot to the back of the head in Novocherkassk prison. Experts, including psychiatrists, criminologists, and law enforcement officials, have debated the reasons behind Andrei Chikatilo's murderous compulsions. His violent tendencies are often attributed to a combination of psychological trauma, childhood deprivation, and an inability to form normal sexual relationships. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chikatilo with a borderline personality disorder with sadistic tendencies. His documented history of impotence played a crucial role in shaping his murderous urges. Unable to perform sexually in a conventional manner, Chikatilo discovered that inflicting pain and witnessing suffering brought him arousal and a sense of power. Many experts believe his inability to engage in normal sexual relationships fueled his obsession with targeting the most vulnerable individuals. Medical professionals have also pointed to his early childhood experiences as pivotal in his psychological development. Growing up during the Holodomor famine and World War II, he was exposed to extreme deprivation and stories of cannibalism. His mother's harsh treatment, frequent beatings, and the constant specter of starvation may have contributed to his emotional detachment and perverse associations between violence and sexual gratification. Criminologists argue that Chikatilo targeted women and young children because they were easy to overpower and less likely to fight back. His early failed sexual encounters with women may have bred resentment, leading him to seek out victims who were vulnerable and defenseless. The brutality of his attacks also suggests a need to dominate and dehumanize his victims completely. Law enforcement officials have also noted that the secrecy and repression in Soviet society allowed him to continue his killing spree for so long. The Soviet Union was reluctant to acknowledge the existence of serial killers, which led to investigative failures and the wrongful conviction of innocent individuals. This bureaucratic inefficiency, coupled with a lack of advanced forensic techniques, enabled Chikatilo to evade capture for years. Writers and journalists analyzing the case have emphasized the role of institutional failures in allowing Chikatilo to continue killing unchecked. Many have pointed out that Soviet-era policies regarding sex crimes and mental illness prevented proper intervention, as discussing such topics was often taboo. The lack of psychological support and a rigid social structure further enabled his monstrous actions. Ultimately, Andrei Chikatilo's crimes were a result of deep-seated psychological issues compounded by historical and societal factors. His case serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers posed by unchecked mental illness and the necessity of effective criminal profiling and forensic investigation. Chikatilo spent his final months in solitary confinement, showing little remorse. His appeal was denied by President Boris Yeltsin, and he was taken to a soundproof execution room. With no final words, he was shot in the back of the head and buried in an unmarked grave. His execution ended one of the most horrifying chapters in Russian criminal history. Andrei Chikatilo's case exposed major flaws in Soviet law enforcement, including wrongful convictions and executions. His crimes prompted advancements in forensic science, psychological profiling, and serial killer investigations in Russia. His psychiatrist, Dr. Buchanovsky, later became a leading expert on criminal behavior. The case also contributed to discussions on criminal psychology, genetic anomalies affecting forensic analysis, and the necessity of law enforcement reform. Chikatilo remains one of the world's most infamous serial killers, and his case continues to be studied in criminology. Andrei Chikatilo's gruesome crimes and the intense manhunt that eventually led to his capture have influenced multiple films and television productions. His case is one of the most notorious in serial killer history, and his psychological profile, as well as the Soviet Union's handling of the investigation, has been explored in various cinematic works. One of the most well-known films based on Chikatilo is Citizen X, 1995, an HBO movie starring Stephen Ray, Donald Sutherland, and Jeffrey DeMunn. The film details the extensive police investigation into his crimes, focusing on the challenges Soviet law enforcement faced, including bureaucratic interference and limited forensic technology. Citizen X is widely praised for its accurate portrayal of the case and remains one of the most comprehensive dramatizations of Chikatilo's crimes. Another film, Evelenko, 2004, starring Malcolm McDowell, takes a more fictionalized approach. It presents a highly stylized version of Chikatilo's story, drawing on elements of psychological horror and dramatizing his motives. While less historically accurate than Citizen X, it offers an unsettling depiction of the psychological torment and brutality associated with his crimes. In addition to these films, Chikatilo's crimes have influenced numerous crime documentaries, such as episodes from Most Evil Serial Killers, Profiling the Criminal Mind, and Criminal Minds, The Real Stories. The character of Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs is also said to have been loosely inspired by various serial killers, including Chikatilo, due to his calculated and methodical approach to murder. His case has left a lasting impact on crime cinema and television, serving as both a cautionary tale and a source of grim fascination for audiences around the world. Andrei Chikatilo's story serves as a grim reminder of how deeply evil can hide in plain sight. A father, a teacher, and a husband, he led a double life of monstrous brutality. His crimes highlight the failures of justice systems that overlook evidence and convict the innocent. While his execution brought closure to many, it did not erase the pain of his victims' families. His case underscores the importance of vigilance, psychological study, and justice. The world must learn from such horrors to prevent future tragedies.